Full-on Cave, Laos. April 17th, 2016. 5 backpackers from Australia arrived in northern Laos to visit Full-on Cave, a hidden limestone system advertised on local posters as a natural water maze. A village guide offered to take them inside for the equivalent of $10 each. The rainy season had begun a week earlier, but the surface weather was deceptively clear. They carried cheap headlamps, bottled water, and a GoPro. No helmets, no ropes. After 30 minutes, the floor began to flood ankle deep. The guide said it was normal. Then from somewhere deep inside the mountain came a deep vibrating hum, the sound of water forcing air through a tight passage. Within minutes, the tunnel filled. 3 of the tourists turned back, crawling toward daylight. 2 followed the guide into a side corridor that rose slightly upward. When rescuers reached them the next morning, only the guide was alive. Authorities closed Full-on indefinitely. Local residents later admitted they had begged tour operators to stop taking foreigners inside during the rains. Mirror Lake Ice Cave, Alaska. January 12, 1992. 2 mountaineers, Adam Voss and Kelly Rains, decided to explore an ice cave beneath Mirror Lake while waiting for storm to pass. The cave glowed blue and white, a frozen cathedral sculpted by meltwater. Their mistake was lingering. A warm air front hit the mountain that afternoon, raising temperatures by 6 degrees. Melting began inside the glacier first, invisible from outside. As they photographed the walls, a low crack echoed overhead. The ceiling split. A slab the size of a car dropped between them. Kelly escaped through a side tunnel. Adam didn't. Search crews couldn't recover his body for 3 days. The ice kept shifting. By then, the cave had completely collapsed. Rangers said later the danger was so obvious that only beauty could have hidden it. Kauai Sink, Oman. November 5th, 2004. 3 engineering students from Muscat drove to the desert to map an uncharted sinkhole rumored to open into a large cavern. They descended with climbing gear borrowed from their university gym. The vertical drop was nearly 40 meters. At the bottom, they found warm, humid air and the smell of sulfur, signs of groundwater. One student began hammering a piton into the wall when his foot struck something metallic. A hollow boom rolled through the chamber. Seconds later, the ground beneath them shifted. A hidden mud pocket gave way. 2 fell into a submerged shaft filled with toxic gas. Only one managed to climb out, coughing violently. When rescuers arrived, they measured the air, 15% oxygen, lethal after minutes. Both victims had asphyxiated before they drowned. The sinkhole was later fenced off by the Ministry of Environment, labeled unstable ground, no entry. The warning sign is still there, half buried in sand. Mount Templar Cave, Switzerland. March 2nd, 1977. A team of 3 cavers from Bern entered Mount Templar Cave to test new carbide lamps. A snowstorm had passed the previous night. Meltwater ran down the slopes above them. Deep inside, they reached a chamber nicknamed the Bell. The floor dipped sharply into a funnel-shaped pit. They heard dripping water turning into a hiss, air being forced upward. A sudden inrush of icy meltwater surged through the tunnel. Their lamps went out instantly. All 3 tried to climb the rope line back to the entrance, but the rising water pinned them against the ceiling. By the time rescuers drilled a bypass shaft 2 days later, the chamber was full. Every alpine caving guidebook now begins with their story, under the heading Never After Snow. Coral Chasm, Philippines. July 8, 2018. Local divers from Cebu discovered a newly open sea cave after an earthquake shifted the coastline. The entrance sat just below the tide line, beautiful, shimmering turquoise. 3 young divers entered without ropes or backup air tanks. The tide turned faster than expected. A swell pushed them deeper, and their bubbles disoriented them in the narrow ceiling pockets. When the first body was recovered, rescuers found his pressure gauge still half full. He hadn't run out of air. He'd simply lost the exit. Authorities sealed the cave with concrete after multiple copycat attempts by adventure bloggers. Hollow Creek Cave, Virginia. April 27, 1980. 4 friends from a local university went camping near Hollow Creek. After dark, they followed the stream to a cave entrance. They wanted to see where the water came from. Inside, the tunnel narrowed and twisted upward. The leader carried a single flashlight. Halfway through, the batteries died. They crawled blindly for an hour before realizing they'd turned around and blocked their own footprints. When searchers found them the next day, 2 were alive, 1 hypothermic and 1 dead from exposure. A rescuer later said, "They were 30 meters from daylight." 30 meters. Kowloon Drain Tunnel, Hong Kong. May 10, 2002. 2 teenage explorers entered an urban storm drain that locals nicknamed the Kowloon Cave. They'd seen online videos of people walking through its concrete tunnels during dry weather. Rain began unexpectedly that afternoon. The city's flood control system diverted runoff straight into the tunnel network. CCTV captured the surge, a solid wall of brown water moving at 30 kilometers per hour. By the time emergency services arrived, the teens were half a kilometer downstream. Their bodies were found near a drainage outfall. Both still wore head-mounted cameras, footage intact. The recording became mandatory viewing in local schools. Ozerna Cave, Ukraine. March 18, 2011. An amateur expedition of 6 Ukrainian cavers entered the Ozerna system, a sprawling labyrinth of gypsum tunnels stretching more than 120 kilometers. They planned a 2-day mapping trip. The temperature underground was a steady 10 degrees Celsius, comfortable enough to lower their guard. After hours of exploration, they set camp near a chamber called Echo Hall. Overnight, condensation short-circuited one of their carbide lamps, filling the air with carbon monoxide. By morning, 4 were unconscious. 2 managed to crawl to a ventilated passage and raise the alarm. The rest never woke up. Investigators later wrote, the flame color had turned orange, a warning they didn't know. Granite Mouth, Canada, September 3, 2019. A professional photography crew attempted to film glowworms inside a cave near Vancouver Island. They brought drones, heavy lights, and extension cables. When the tide came in, seawater entered through cracks in the floor. The cables shorted, igniting a battery pack. Thick smoke filled the narrow tunnel. 2 crew members escaped through a secondary exit. 1 collapsed from fumes before reaching the surface. The cause of death wasn't drowning, it was smoke inhalation underground. Firefighters described it as a surface world mistake repeated below ground. Rocca Nera Cave, Italy, August 29, 1974. 5 members of an Italian climbing club descended into Rocca Nera Cave in the Dolomites. Their goal was to recover lost gear from a previous expedition. They carried nylon ropes treated with early chemical waterproofing. Midway down the main shaft, 1 rope brushed against a carbide flame. It caught fire instantly, dripping molten plastic onto the climber below. He fell nearly 20 meters. Rescuers found the others alive but in shock, their hands burned from trying to grab the flaming line. Investigators banned that rope coating worldwide afterward.